Okay, so the United Nations now. The United Nations is the world's largest and most widely recognized intergovernmental organization, not to be confused with an NGO, okay, a non-governmental organization. Remember, it's an IGO, meaning intergovernmental, different governments are coming together to work together. It is a chief organization involved with international law, as we kind of have figured out by now. As I said, it was established under the UN Charter 1945, and it was comprised of several UN organs, including General Assembly. So the General Assembly is like the Parliament of Nations, right? It's the image of the UN that we all have, that big room where they all kind of come meet together and sit together and vote and discuss particular human rights breaches and issues. It has 193 members. It consists of representatives from all member states with equal voting power. It's the main forum for international discussions, deliberations, declarations, and recommendations relating to human rights, as I said. Each member has only one vote. Now, that has been criticized because people think should states with a population of 1 million have the same or equal value of their vote to states with, I don't know, billions of people? Should they only have one vote each, or should, you have one vote per 10 million people you have in your population? Equal voting power in international discussions, declarations, and recommendations, okay? The good of that is that, there's equal voting power. So that means that marginalized or often, marginalized states or states that aren't as powerful or dominant as others aren't kind of quieted by more powerful and dominant states, okay? All right, so the responsibility to protect. For those of you who are doing World Order, you will look at this in greater detail in that elective, but this is kind of an introduction to it, and for everyone else, we still need to know this principle. So, the responsibility to protect forefronts the protection of human rights as an integral part of responsibility that goes with being a sovereign state. It has 3 pillars. Firstly, that states' responsibility to protect their population from international crimes. Secondly, that it's the state's responsibility to assist other states to build their own capacity to protect human rights. And thirdly, the responsibility to take action when a state has failed to protect their population. Okay, so if Australia is not protecting our human rights, other states carry the onus or carry the responsibility to protect our human rights. For example, in Syria, the US invaded in 2003 as ISIS was accused of countless human rights breaches, and the Syrian government weren't acting against it. So the UN, under the responsibility to protect, invaded Syria. We also have the Security Council, which is another organ or part of the UN. It has 15 members, 5 are permanent: US, UK, China, Russia, and France. Yes, okay, there are 5 there. Sorry, I was thinking, did I only put 4? 5. 10 other countries elected for 2-year tenures. So on a cycle of 2 years, Australia might be a part of the Security Council, and then someone else is voted in. It's charged with the preservation of international peace and security. It exercises its power through legally binding resolutions and can authorize military sanctions, actions, or peacekeeping operations. The 5 permanent members have the power to veto decisions, so say, nope, this is not happening. And if they vote no, it's not going ahead, and they have the power to send peacekeepers. Okay, so if the other 10 members say no, that doesn't necessarily mean that the decision's not going ahead. That will only be the case if they have a majority no vote, but if everyone else says yes, and then China, for example, says no, it's not going ahead. They have veto power. Okay, there's also the UN Secretariat, which provides the various information, studies, tasks, and facilities needed by the UN. So it's doing all the kind of information gathering. And then we also have the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ, which has it's the UN's primary judicial organ. It has jurisdiction under the UN Charter to settle international disputes submitted to it by member states and produce advisory opinions on matters of international law. Okay, so basically Australia versus Japan, as I was talking about before, they would have come to the ICJ for settlement regarding whaling in Australian waters. Yeah, as it mentions there. Okay, and then we also have the UN Human Rights Council. Its main purpose is to promote and protect human rights by investigating and exposing human rights breaches, and then producing reports and recommendations. So a good example of this is annually it releases reports on retentionist states. What's a retentionist state? A state that still uses capital punishment or the death penalty. Okay, so it produces reports on the amount of times that they use the death penalty in that state. So China in 2020, I believe, used the death penalty over 1,000 times. Okay, and that was reported in the UN Human Rights Council report for that year. Why does it do this? Well, the aim of naming and shaming. Okay, it kind of follows the idea that if you name and shame a state for its use of capital punishment, the state will be more likely to prohibit the use of capital punishment domestically. Is this the case with China? Probably not, because China does not really care. It uses the most cases of capital punishment globally. Nonetheless, the UN Human Rights Council has 47 members that are elected by the General Assembly. It allows for a procedure for complaints by individuals with breached human rights. It conducts reviews of the human rights situation in all 193 member states. An advisory committee provides expertise and advice. It has been condemned unlawful. Ban Ki-moon, 2007, says that all victims of human rights abuses should be able to look to the Human Rights Council as a forum and springboard for action. Yeah, so it's designed as an organ, a springboard for action to actually materialize change for human rights. Australia is a member, yet countries are critical of Australia's election due to inhumane treatments of refugees, as I was saying, in detention centres, at-sea incarceration rates, homelessness, and our strict terrorism laws. Okay, so the United Nations, its areas of effectiveness and ineffectiveness. Okay, you need to know this. Firstly, it's effective because it's kind of published the International Bill of Rights, right? UN Charter, ICCPR, ICSCR, UDHR, right? This has then catapulted into the publication of other treaties that have protected other human rights or have been more specific on particular human rights, which again is a really massive thing, because think about how many states have been influenced by these treaties, have actually enacted these legislations into their own domestic legislation. Then we have the UN Summit 2005, which introduced the responsibility to protect doctrine, which is a really massive thing and really helps with protecting human rights and responding to human rights breaches. We also have the promotion of environmental rights, which is becoming increasingly more important, such as we saw in the Paris Agreement that we spoke about earlier. The UN Millennium Development Goals as well. So the UN, those are kind of the areas of effectiveness. The biggest area of effectiveness is, I would argue, the Bill of Rights. Could also talk about peacekeeping missions as well. There's an array of things to talk about. Areas of ineffectiveness though. Certain countries that are signatories to the UN continue to dispute the notion of human rights and believe it is up to the state to decide on the rights of their people, such as China. Okay, veto power has also been criticized because it regularly stands in the way of aims of the UN summit. Okay, as I said, Syrian conflict, the UN wanted to do something about it. China and Russia vetoed that decision. Nothing was done. The powers of the P5, all with nuclear weapons. So there we're talking about, again, China, Russia, France, England, and the US. In the UN Security Council go unchecked. Okay, so because they have veto power, there's no one kind of checking them and performing those checks and balances. And again, it's been critiqued for being Eurocentric, okay? The UN, has been critiqued for being Eurocentric and not considering non-European ideas of human rights and protecting human rights.